He feeds 2 alien strays. 19 minutes later, 7,000 Imperial ships arrive and claim him. Captain Arlen Hayes had always liked quiet. It was why he had chosen this dusty corner of the galaxy for his small freighter's repair stop. The settlement was barely more than a scattering of metal buildings and dirt streets, where the wind carried the scent of scorched rock and old fuel. Most people avoided it, thinking it too remote, too empty, too far from the thriving star lanes. But Arlen liked it. Quiet meant no bureaucracy. Quiet meant he could work on his ship in peace. Quiet meant no one telling him how to live his life. He wiped his hands on a rag and glanced at the hull of his freighter, the Starling, which gleamed faintly under the pale light of the twin suns. The repairs were nearly done. Just a few more adjustments to the energy conduit and he could finally take off. He was humming a tune, small and simple, when he noticed movement at the edge of the settlement, a rust-colored blur crouching among the rocks. At first he thought it was a stray animal. This planet had a few native species, but most were shy and dangerous. Still, something about this one seemed different. It paused and watched him. Its eyes were wide, intelligent, not wild. And then he saw it wasn't alone. Another creature, smaller and sleek, with a shiny black hide, slipped silently through the sand beside the first. Arlen straightened. He was no stranger to alien life, having seen dozens of species on the edge worlds and in the trading hubs. But these were strange. They looked weak, hungry, even scared. He could see the ribs on the larger one, the glint of worry in their eyes. Somehow, they seemed to know he meant no harm, but they weren't sure. Arlen set his tools down and crouched, keeping his hands visible. "Hey, you hungry?" he asked, his voice calm. He reached into his bag and pulled out some rations, protein bars meant for emergencies. The larger one hissed softly and bared small fangs. The smaller one crouched lower, tail twitching. Neither attacked, but neither came closer. Arlen smiled. Okay, no rush." He sat on the ground, leaving the rations on a flat rock. Then he stepped back and raised his hands again, showing he was harmless. Minutes passed. The wind stirred, and for a moment Arlen thought they would vanish. Then the larger one crept forward, sniffing the food. It hesitated. Its eyes darted to him. Then it took a tentative bite. The smaller one followed, quicker and bolder. Arlen laughed softly. "Good, eat. You need it." They ate cautiously, stealing glances at him but not running. Arlen watched them, studying their movements. The larger one had thick, reddish fur, almost like a small bear, but its limbs were long and flexible, ending in clawed hands that could easily grasp tools or weapons. Its eyes were golden, intelligent, and alert. The smaller one was more like a cat crossed with a lizard, sleek, fast, and graceful. Its black hide shimmered in the sunlight. Both were clearly alien, and both were clearly in trouble. Arlen reached for his first aid kit. "Looks like someone didn't feed you for a while, huh?" He tore a piece of cloth and wrapped it around the larger one's paw, which was scraped and bleeding. It twitched but didn't struggle. He worked carefully, cleaning the wound and bandaging it. The smaller one watched closely, its eyes moving like it was trying to understand what he was doing. "You're lucky I like strays," Arlen said, smiling. "Most people here would have shot you on sight." The larger creature gave a low, rumbling sound. Arlen laughed. "Yeah, I get it. You don't talk our language, we don't talk yours, but we get by." He finished treating the wounds and gave them some water from his canister. Both drank cautiously, lapping at it with long, soft tongues. He couldn't stop himself from studying them. These creatures were not native to this planet. He knew that immediately. Something in their posture and the way they moved told him they had been trained, or at least raised, in confinement. They were survivors, not wild animals. Arlen leaned back against a rock. He wanted to take a break, but a nagging feeling crawled over him. He glanced at the sky, at the faint glimmer of ships in orbit far above the planet. Nothing unusual, he told himself, just the usual traffic. He turned back to the aliens. "You've got a story, don't you?" he said. "You're not from here. You didn't just wander off from the next canyon over. So, what's your story? Neither responded, of course. But the smaller one tilted its head, making a strange sound like a whistle. The larger one stepped closer, lowering its golden eyes to meet his. Arlen felt a shiver. There was intelligence there, real intelligence and maybe fear. He reached into his bag again and pulled out a few more rations. "Here," he said softly, "take it. You're safe here, at least for now." The larger one hesitated, then took a piece gently, nibbling at it. The smaller one pounced playfully but not aggressively, grabbing the other ration and retreating a few steps. Arlen shook his head and laughed. Okay, I see how it is. You two are trouble." A sudden clanging sound from the settlement startled him. A few workers were moving crates in the distance, muttering to each other. The creatures froze, ears twitching, eyes darting. The larger one hissed low, like a warning. Arlen's heart rate quickened slightly. He crouched lower. "It's okay, I got you." Minutes stretched. The aliens stayed close now, their trust growing. The larger one rested its head on its paws near him, while the smaller one curled near his boots. Arlen could feel a bond forming, odd as it was. Stray aliens, he thought. Who would have imagined it? Then the small one suddenly made a series of loud, urgent chirps and gestures, pointing at the sky. Its tone was insistent, almost desperate. The larger one joined, rumbling low, staring upward. Arlen frowned. "What?" He followed their gaze and saw nothing at first. Then his sensors beeped faintly from his ship, long-range energy readings, massive and unusual. His brow furrowed. "That's not normal," he muttered. The alien seemed to sense his concern. The larger one moved closer, brushing against him as if urging him to pay attention. The smaller one continued its chirps, running small circles on the ground, then darting up to point again. Arlen squinted, trying to read the readings. And then he saw it, a glint far above the horizon like a tiny star that was moving strangely. Too fast, too coordinated. He tapped the sensors again. His heart skipped. Hundreds of energy signatures all moving in formation, not stars, ships. Thousands of ships. Great. Just great, he muttered under his breath. The aliens seemed to understand the urgency. The smaller one darted to his side, brushing against his leg, almost pulling him forward. The larger one stood, its body tense and alert. Arlen's mind raced. He had survived pirate attacks, asteroid storms, even close encounters with rogue alien patrols. But this was different. Thousands of ships moving as one and heading straight for him. And whatever they weren't looking for trade. He grabbed his tools, shoved them into the bag, and stood. "All right," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Looks like you two just made me a very important person. Let's see if we can survive the next, 19 minutes." The aliens hissed softly, but they stayed close. Arlen's fingers danced over the controls of his freighter, pulling up schematics and escape options. The settlement around him was quiet, oblivious to the danger above. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. These two creatures, fragile as they were now relying on him for survival. And it wasn't just survival. It was going to be a fight that no one expected. Minutes passed. The energy readings grew stronger, more intense. Shadows moved across the sky, though it was still too distant to see clearly. Arlen's mind worked faster than ever. He could see paths of escape, weak points, even potential tricks he could use against ships far bigger and more powerful than anything on this planet. The aliens watched him, their trust evident now. The smaller one twined around his leg as he crouched by the freighter, inspecting shields and energy conduits. The larger one stayed near his side, eyes sharp, ears twitching at every sound. Arlen knew one thing with certainty. Whatever was coming for them, it had no idea what humans were capable of. And that was exactly the advantage he planned to use. The wind blew dust across the desolate settlement, carrying the faint scent of scorched metal and dry stone. Captain Arlen Hayes crouched by the side of his freighter, the Starling, and stared at the sky. The two alien strays stayed close, the larger one standing protectively, the smaller one circling his boots in nervous excitement. Arlen's fingers flew across the freighter's control panel, tapping into sensors and external feeds. His eyes widened as the readouts became clearer. Energy signatures, thousands of them, moving in formation. He muttered under his breath, "Well, that's new." The alien seemed to sense his tension. The smaller one chirped urgently and twitched its tail. The larger one made a low rumble, eyes locked on the horizon. They were not just afraid, they were terrified. Arlen's stomach tightened. He had no idea what kind of force he was dealing with, but instinct told him it was big. He jumped to his feet and began assessing escape routes. The settlement was small, built among rocky hills, with few roads and even fewer vehicles. The Starling could fly, yes, but it was slower than a real warship. He would need to use trickery, speed, and terrain to get away. The aliens moved closer. Arlen knelt and spoke softly. "All right, you two. Time to see if we can survive the next, I don't know, 19 minutes. "Ready?" The smaller one chirped sharply and leaped to his shoulder. The larger one simply stared at him, then sat, tense but obedient. Arlen smiled faintly. "Good, let's go." He activated the freighter's external sensors and started scanning the sky. Far above, the energy signatures were clearer now, like a storm of tiny stars moving in perfect formation. Hundreds became thousands. The shape of the fleet was enormous, almost incomprehensible. 7,000 ships. Arlen's jaw tightened. 7,000. What the hell did I do? He quickly accessed the freighter's database and compared ship classes. The Empire had long been a distant rumor to many colonists, but Arlen had studied their fleet out of curiosity. He knew their firepower was unmatched, their technology advanced, their strategy ruthless. And now, somehow, they had found him. The aliens reacted to the readings immediately. The smaller one hissed sharply, leaping down from his shoulder, tail flicking. The larger one stepped forward, brushing against Arlen's leg, as if to say, "We know what they're coming for." "Yeah," Arlen said softly, "you're right, they're coming for you." He tapped the control panel, bringing up the colony's sensor network. Most of it was offline, abandoned decades ago, but enough remained to give him an advantage. He analyzed the terrain, rocky outcroppings, narrow canyons, abandoned industrial sites, perfect for hiding, perfect for ambushes. He turned to the aliens. "We don't fight them head-on. Not yet. We'll use the land and maybe, just maybe, they'll underestimate us." The smaller alien chirped again, clearly responding. Arlen nodded. He didn't understand the sounds fully, but he sensed agreement. These creatures were intelligent, faster learners than most humans he had met. Maybe they would even help him survive. The ground trembled faintly, though it could have been his imagination. And then, distant but unmistakable, a deep, mechanical hum rolled across the planet. Shadows flickered over the hills. The first of the Imperial scouts had arrived. Arlen's mind raced. He had minutes, maybe less, to prepare. He ran to the nearest warehouse, dragging the two aliens with him. The large one moved easily through narrow corridors. The smaller one was nearly invisible in the shadows. Arlen scanned the interior, finding supplies, cables, tools, and old equipment. He began setting up what he called human traps, decoy beacons, improvised shields, and sensor jammers. The first scout ship broke the horizon. It was small, agile, a fraction of the main fleet's size, but it carried deadly lasers and detection arrays. Arlen watched its approach, heart steady. He triggered the decoys. Lights blinked, heat signatures bounced, and the scout's targeting systems wavered. Come on," he muttered. The alien stayed close, alert but quiet. The scout fired. The blast hit a rock formation and ricocheted harmlessly. Arlen ducked behind a metal crate. "Not bad, huh?" he said. The smaller alien chirped as if in agreement. The larger one rumbled low, eyes fixed on the enemy. Arlen realized something. The Empire had never seen humans fight like this. They relied on overwhelming numbers, advanced sensors, and brute force. Humans were clever. Humans improvised. Humans thought differently. And in this moment, that difference was his weapon. He sprinted across the warehouse, grabbing a coil of energy cable. With quick hands, he rigged a makeshift tripline connected to a small EMP generator. He positioned it near the open doorway, then ducked back into cover. The scout moved in, scanning for life signs. Arlen's heart pounded. He held his breath. And then the line tripped. A bright pulse of energy burst out, short-circuiting the Scout's sensors. Its engine sputtered. The craft crashed into the canyon rocks outside. The aliens watched, almost in awe. Arlen wiped sweat from his brow. "One down," he said quietly. 6,999 to go. He knew joking wouldn't help morale, his own or the aliens, but it eased his mind. Survival depended on focus, speed, and creativity, not fear. Fear was useless. The second wave of Imperial ships began arriving in orbit. Larger now, their energy signatures massive and intimidating. Arlen activated the freighter's cloaking field, a last resort measure that could hide the ship from scanners for a short time. He checked fuel levels, engine output, shield strength. Not enough for a full fight, but enough for tricks. The aliens moved closer. The larger one brushed against him, then shifted to stand in front of the smaller one as if shielding it. Arlen smiled faintly. "Yeah, I got you," he said. "We stick together, that's how we survive." Suddenly, the settlement's communication arrays picked up the first Imperial broadcast. A booming voice filled the air. "All fugitives are to be surrendered immediately. Resistance will be punished. Imperial forces are en route to reclaim their subjects." Arlen felt the weight of those words, heavy and oppressive. He glanced at the aliens. They were trembling slightly but staying close. The voice continued, repeating threats and warnings. Arlen frowned. "Subjects." "You mean them?" The larger alien growled softly, eyes fixed on him. Arlen nodded. "All right, that's confirmed. You're not just random strays, you belong to them." The human mind worked faster than he realized. 7,000 ships, an empire, and 2 aliens who could not speak his language fluently, but who were clearly intelligent. He ran through calculations. Even with the Starling's cloaking, he couldn't outrun the fleet. He couldn't fight them head-on. But maybe he didn't have to. He pulled out his communicator, accessing a private frequency used by colony freighters. "Patch me through to the old navigation relay," he muttered. The system was ancient, poorly maintained, but enough for what he had in mind. The smaller alien chirped sharply, running up to press its claw against one of the freighter's panels. Arlen stared. It wasn't random. It was helping. Somehow, instinctively, it understood the system better than he had at first. A spark of amusement lit his chest. "Okay, maybe you're worth saving," he said. He worked quickly, rerouting power to create decoy energy signatures across the terrain. The large alien helped by standing on pressure points, activating sensors with its weight. Arlen marveled at their intelligence. Humans were not the only species capable of clever thinking, but the combination of human ingenuity and alien instincts might just work. Time passed slowly, each minute stretching like an hour. The first small fighters were already orbiting, scanning. They detected decoy readings, moved closer, and fired at shadows that weren't there. Arlen ducked behind cover, signaling the aliens to stay low. The larger one growled and swiped at a scanner, knocking it to the side. Sparks flew. Arlen grinned. Good thinking. The scouts regrouped. Larger ships moved in. The main fleet was visible now, vast and imposing. Arlen felt the tension, but he refused to panic. Humans had survived impossible odds before. Why not now? He checked the freighter's engines, prepared for a short jump. He calculated the timing. If they waited too long, they would be trapped. Too soon, and they might not escape. He glanced at the aliens. Both stared at him, alert and waiting. He nodded. "Soon," he whispered. "Hold on." Suddenly, a loud hum filled the air. The fleet was lowering orbit, preparing to deploy planetary landing forces. Thousands of ships, massive and deadly. Arlen's heart raced. Every second counted. He activated another trap, a series of electromagnetic pulses rigged in the canyon outside. The idea was simple: blind the enemy ships temporarily, then use the terrain to hide the freighter. The first pulse went off. The scout ship's sensors blinked out. Engines sputtered. They spun, trying to recalibrate. Arlen activated the freighter's cloak. The aliens hissed softly in surprise. The larger one pressed against him, as if to make sure he was still there. "Yeah," he said, smiling despite the danger, "we're doing this together." The freighter lifted off, moving silently over the canyon. Shadows of the Imperial ships passed overhead, scanning for life. The larger alien growled, tail swishing. The smaller one chirped rapidly, guiding Arlen with instinctive gestures toward a safe path. Minutes ticked by. Every sense was on high alert. Every decision mattered. And then finally, the freighter was in position to make a short jump to the next safe zone. Arlen's hands worked the controls with precision, adjusting power, shields, and engines in perfect harmony. He glanced at the aliens. They were tense but ready. He grinned. Almost there. Just a little more. And in that moment, he realized something profound. The Empire had no idea who they were dealing with. Humans weren't just survivors. Humans were clever, adaptable, and fearless when the odds were impossible. And today, humans were going to prove it. The Starling floated silently over the rocky canyon, its engines humming low as Captain Arlen Hayes scanned the horizon. Shadows of Imperial ships stretched across the desert, massive and unyielding, like predators circling prey. He could feel the weight of their numbers pressing down on him. 7,000 ships, 7,000 vessels, all designed to overwhelm, destroy, and dominate. And yet, for some reason, he felt calm. The two alien strays stayed close. The larger one had taken a protective stance behind the freighter's engines, its golden eyes constantly scanning the approaching fleet. The smaller one perched on a control panel, tail flicking nervously but alert, chirping at intervals that only Arlen seemed to partially understand. He had begun to learn the pattern. It was warning signals, suggestions, reactions. Together they were a team, a strange, unlikely team, but a team nonetheless. Arlen's mind raced, calculating possibilities. Head-on confrontation was impossible. Their weapons could cut through his freighter like paper. He needed misdirection, traps, guerrilla tactics, anything to confuse and delay them. He activated the first phase of his plan. From the freighter's underbelly, a series of drones launched. Small, fast, and heavily modified by Arlen's own design, they projected false energy signatures, mimicking life signs and machinery across the canyon. Imperial sensors immediately picked them up. Come on, Arlen whispered. The drones zipped between rocks, flashing lights, emitting heat signatures and bouncing radar signals. The larger alien growled in satisfaction. The smaller one chirped sharply, nudging the control panel, almost as if directing the drone's flight paths. The Empire responded predictably. Scout ships dove toward the decoys, firing weapons that struck nothing but dust and rock. Arlen smiled grimly. Step 1 complete. He didn't waste a moment. Using the terrain, he began a series of quick maneuvers, zigzagging the freighter through narrow canyons. Imperial ships, built for straight-line efficiency and overwhelming firepower, struggled to follow. Some attempted to flank him, but Arlen had anticipated it. Hidden valleys and ridges allowed him to disappear from sensors for precious seconds, enough to reappear where the fleet least expected. The larger alien padded silently across the deck, brushing against his leg as if to say, "Good job." The smaller one chirped in rapid bursts. Arlen nodded. "Yeah, you're helping more than you know." Minutes became tense. Then came the first warning. A beam of energy shot from an orbiting cruiser, burning across the canyon. The freighter shuddered as it missed by inches, sending sparks across the hull. Arlen swore, twisting the controls. The drone scattered, drawing the enemy's attention. He had no illusions. This was a fight for survival, not glory. But humans had a habit of surviving impossible odds, and Arlen intended to prove it. He glanced at the aliens. The larger one growled low, stepping forward, muscles tensed. The smaller one chirped again, leaping onto his shoulder. Their loyalty was clear. They trusted him, and somehow that gave him confidence. Arlen activated the next phase, the canyon trap. Years ago, he had mapped the area in detail. Hidden beneath layers of rock and sand were narrow crevices and unstable cliffs. He had rigged explosives and energy pulses throughout the canyon during his earlier scouting. Now was the time to use them. He flew toward a particularly narrow passage, baiting the Imperial ships. As the first wave of fighters entered, Arlen triggered a series of pulses. Shields flickered. Engines sputtered. Ships spun out of control, colliding with rock walls or each other. The larger alien hissed approvingly. The smaller one chirped in excitement, nuzzling Arlen's arm. He grinned. Not bad for a few minutes' work, huh? The Empire was not so easily fooled, however. Larger ships adjusted their approach, forming tighter formations. Massive cruisers dropped into the canyon's upper reaches, scanning, firing, and attempting to flush him out. Arlen thought fast. He activated the freighter's cloaking field, not to escape but to bait them further in. The ships fired blindly, energy beams slicing through rock, triggering small avalanches and explosions. Arlen guided the freighter expertly, dodging debris, using every trick he knew. He glanced at the larger alien. Its posture was alert, ready to pounce if necessary. The smaller one continued chirping. Arlen suddenly realized that he was not alone, not truly. Humans survived not just because of strength, but because of alliances, understanding, and trust. Even these two aliens, weak and small compared to the Empire, could make a difference. Minutes stretched. The freighter darted through the canyon like a shadow, leaving chaos in its wake. Imperial ships, despite their technology and numbers, struggled to keep up. Arlen could see frustration building across the fleet's communication channels. They expected fear, not this kind of human cleverness. And then came the boldest move yet. He led a group of fighters toward a steep cliffside, narrow and barely navigable. Using the freighter's enhanced gravity thrusters, he performed a maneuver no alien ship had anticipated. He hovered briefly at impossible angles, firing energy pulses at key points, triggering collapses that blocked the fleet's path temporarily. The larger alien growled, tail swishing. The smaller one chirped furiously, almost guiding his hands. Arlen laughed softly. Yeah, I see it too. Good instincts. Imperial ships tried to adjust, but for every step they made, Arlen had already thought 3 steps ahead. The human mind, he realized, was a weapon in itself. Not brute strength, not advanced technology, just creativity, adaptability, and the ability to see patterns others could not. Despite the chaos, he felt a strange calm. The freighter's hull shivered from near misses and alarms blared constantly, but Arlen was in his element. Humans thrived under pressure. They adapted. They survived. And right now, he was showing the Empire why. The aliens were no longer scared. The larger one moved confidently beside him, ready to act if needed. The smaller one chirped, offering subtle suggestions. Somehow, Arlen understood them now, not perfectly, but enough. They were partners in this fight, instinctively responding to the humans' movements. As the freighter exited the canyon, Arlen made a risky calculation. A nearby canyon split into 2 valleys. One led to a narrow jump point for hyperspace escape. The other was an open plain, where the Empire's massive ships could trap him. He took the jump, skimming rocks at impossible angles, using every ounce of skill. The Imperial ships reacted quickly, firing energy beams, attempting to block him. But the combination of speed, terrain, and improvisation made him almost untouchable. Almost there, he muttered, sweat dripping down his forehead. The aliens chirped in unison as if confirming the plan. Arlen gritted his teeth. Every maneuver, every pulse, every second mattered. And then finally they were at the jump point. The freighter hovered briefly, engines humming. Arlen adjusted the coordinates, ready for the leap into hyperspace. His fingers danced over the controls, double-checking every system. Shields, stable, cloak, engaged, engines, maximum output. The larger alien stepped close, golden eyes shining. The smaller one perched on his shoulder, tail flicking nervously. Arlen exhaled. Here goes everything. He activated the jump sequence. The canyon blurred, the horizon stretched, and with a brilliant flash the starling vanished into hyperspace. For a few moments, silence reigned. No alarms, no engines, just the calm hum of the freighter in the dark void between stars. Arlen slumped back, breathing heavily. The aliens nestled close, tired but safe. He allowed himself a small grin. We did it, first stage, survived the impossible. But he knew it was only the beginning. The Empire would not forget. 7,000 ships would not be easily deterred. And yet somehow, Arlen felt confident. He had creativity, courage, and unexpected allies. He had shown the first glimmer of what humans were capable of. And the galaxy had just begun to notice. Hyperspace stretched infinitely ahead, the void a dark canvas dotted with distant stars. Captain Arlen Hayes leaned back in the pilot's chair of the Starling, exhaling slowly. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel relief. The first wave of Imperial pursuit had been escaped. The alien strays, now full partners in this extraordinary fight, perched nearby, one on his shoulder, the other at his side, alert but calm. But he knew the Empire would not wait long. 7,000 ships, relentless in their pursuit, would not let two strays and a single human slip away easily. Arlen's mind worked swiftly. Humans had survived against odds that would crush others because they could think differently, adapt quickly, and turn weakness into strength. Today, that strength would be tested more than ever. The larger alien padded across the freighter deck, brushing against his leg, golden eyes sharp. The smaller one chirped rapidly, tail flicking. Arlen had begun to understand their language, not fully, but enough to grasp urgency, warnings, and even tactical suggestions. Somehow, instinctive coordination between species was forming. Humans and aliens could be allies, and perhaps, just perhaps, the Empire had underestimated that possibility. Arlen brought up the navigation screens. The next system they were entering was sparsely populated, a maze of asteroid fields and abandoned outposts, a perfect battlefield for a clever human. He smiled faintly. "All right, team," he said softly, "let's see how unpredictable humans can really be." The first challenge appeared almost immediately. A pair of Imperial scouts dropped from hyperspace ahead, sensors scanning. Their size was minimal compared to the massive fleet, but their firepower could shred the freighter in seconds. Arlen's hands moved quickly over the controls. He engaged the cloaking field briefly, using it to hide the freighter's heat signature among the debris of drifting asteroids. The scouts fired blindly, energy bolts streaking past rocks, exploding harmlessly. The larger alien growled, impressed, and nudged a control lever. Arlen glanced down. Its touch had activated the freighter's decoy system, a combination of lights, heat, and radar bounces that created multiple phantom ships. The smaller alien chirped sharply, hopping from panel to panel, coordinating with the human's maneuvers. "Good job," Arlen whispered. "You're better than I thought." The freighter zigzagged through the asteroid field, drones launched in swarms to distract the scouts further. Arlen triggered micro-explosions at precise intervals, breaking line of sight and forcing the enemy to split their focus. The scouts, despite advanced sensors and superior technology, struggled to track him. Humans were unpredictable, and that unpredictability was now a weapon. A sudden alarm blared. Larger Imperial ships had dropped out of hyperspace. Cruiser-class vessels, bristling with weapons, surrounded the field. Arlen's chest tightened. 7,000 ships would not be so easily fooled by decoys and small maneuvers. He needed a bold plan, one that required precision, timing, and a bit of luck. He glanced at the aliens. The larger one sat upright, muscles tense, ready for action. The smaller one hopped lightly onto the console, tail swishing, seemingly alerting him to weaknesses in the enemy's formation. Arlen nodded. "All right, we do this together." The plan was simple, though risky. Using the asteroid field as cover, the freighter would draw the cruisers into a narrow canyon of dense asteroids. Once inside, they would be forced to slow, maneuver poorly, and become vulnerable. Then Arlen would trigger a series of magnetic pulses rigged to the freighter's hull, enough to disable energy shields temporarily for the Imperial ships within range. The alien strays would assist by guiding, activating auxiliary panels, and helping him time the sequence. The first phase began. The Starling weaved through the dense field, sensors mapping every asteroid, every potential trap. The cruisers followed, confident in their speed and firepower. But confidence, Arlen knew, was a dangerous weakness. As they entered the canyon, Arlen activated the pulses. A wave of energy surged outward. Imperial shields flickered, engines sputtered, and several cruisers collided with asteroids or each other. Alarms screamed across the freighter. The larger alien growled, the smaller one chirped wildly, but Arlen grinned. It worked, but the Empire adapted quickly. Remaining ships adjusted, forming a tight formation, scanning for life signatures. Arlen realized he had only bought minutes, time to escalate. He activated a secondary system. The freighter's thrusters fired at extreme angles, creating gravitational disturbances that altered the trajectory of asteroids. Massive rocks tumbled unpredictably, forcing enemy ships to dodge or collide. The cruisers hesitated, their formation broken. Come on," he muttered. The aliens hissed and chirped, warning him of incoming fire. Arlen swerved just in time, dodging a beam that would have sliced through the hull. He realized something profound. Humans did not rely solely on firepower. They relied on imagination, improvisation, and understanding of patterns, and that made them dangerous, terribly dangerous. The larger alien, standing near the freighter's rear, extended its claws, activating a series of old mining drones Arlen had retrofitted. The drones zipped through the canyon, creating false signals and collisions, further confusing the enemy. The smaller one chirped rapidly, coordinating movements, almost as if guiding Arlen's hands. Hours, or what felt like hours, though in reality it was minutes, passed in a blur of maneuvers, blasts, and clever tricks. Arlen's body ached, but his mind was sharp. He felt alive in a way he never had before. The freighter darted through impossible angles, each maneuver calculated to outwit the Empire. And then came the breakthrough. A narrow exit appeared, a tunnel barely wider than the freighter itself. If he could navigate it, they could escape the asteroid field entirely and emerge into a safe zone. But only one attempt was possible. One miscalculation, one wrong move, and the freighter, and everyone on it, would be destroyed. Arlen's hands danced across the controls. The larger alien growled, tense but trusting. The smaller one perched beside him, tail flicking, almost urging him onward. He took a deep breath. Humans thrived under pressure. They adapted. They survived. He steered the freighter into the tunnel. Rocks scraped past the hull, thrusters fired at impossible angles, and for a moment silence reigned. A tense, fragile silence. Then, with a jolt and a screech of metal, the Starling emerged from the tunnel asteroid field behind them, into open space. The aliens reacted immediately. The larger one purred, a low, satisfied rumble. The smaller one chirped, tail flicking in excitement. Arlen exhaled, leaning back in the pilot's chair. We made it, first stage complete. But the Empire was not finished. More ships appeared on sensors, faster and larger than before. Capital ships, massive and terrifying, were moving to cut off escape routes. Arlen's heart pounded. They were relentless. They were precise. And yet they were still human prey. He checked the freighter's systems. Shields at 70%. Engines stable. Cloaking on standby. Fuel sufficient for one more jump. The aliens watched him closely, their instincts telling him what to do. Somehow, he realized that this partnership was more powerful than he had imagined. Humans and aliens working together, combining intuition, strategy, and creativity. He made a decision. Rather than flee immediately, he would draw the Empire deeper into the asteroid field, using decoys, drones, and traps to scatter their formation. Then, when they were disorganized, he would execute a hyperspace jump to a safe location. Minutes became a tense dance of maneuvers. Imperial ships fired relentlessly, energy beams cutting through space, exploding asteroids into dangerous shrapnel. Arlen's calculations were precise, every move counted. The larger alien nudged a control lever, activating another trap. The smaller one chirped rapidly, guiding him through asteroid clusters. And then, finally, the fleet faltered. Confused, scattered, disoriented. The perfect moment for the human move. Arlen grinned. All right, let's go home. He engaged the hyperspace jump sequence. Stars stretched into lines, the freighter trembling as the jump activated. The aliens hissed and chirped, holding tight. And in a flash of light, the starling vanished from the battlefield, leaving the Empire momentarily stunned. For a few moments, silence reigned in the freighter. The aliens huddled close. Arlen leaned back, sweat dripping, heart racing. We did it. Against 7,000 ships, we survived. That's humans for you. He glanced at the aliens. The larger one purred, almost like laughter. The smaller one chirped, tail swishing. Together, they had proven something extraordinary. Humans, against impossible odds, could think, adapt, and survive. And in that moment, the galaxy began to realize that humans were not to be underestimated. But Arlen knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would not forget. 7,000 ships could regroup. They could pursue, adapt, and strike again. But humans would be ready. Humans would fight. Humans would survive. And perhaps, just perhaps, humans would change the galaxy forever.